call it incremental budgeting. This approach we call it incremental budgeting. Basically, it is extrapolation from the historical figures. Yes, you extend what has been happening in the past, like you said, into the future. But in that exercise, managers in preparing the budgets for a future period would look at previous budgets, actual results, and also expectations for the future. Considering all that, history, experience, and future expectations are all considered, and then you will put a figure, and a certain percentage may be increased. And certain organizations, they may have a norm to say that okay, every year you increase by a certain percentage, right? So that there are sometimes organizations do like that. So another organization might say in general you have to increase, but everyone should come up with projects and say okay, how much you can cut down. Or else they will pick certain specific expenditure and they will say okay, now this expenditure you will have to definitely cut down, and then they might be targets as well. But the overall logic is this percentage increase. Now you need to tell me, is it a good thing or a bad thing to do the budgets in that way? Is it a good thing? If so, why? If it is not such a good thing, why not?
For management, it is a good thing because incremental always increases value for them.
Okay. When you say management, who will be
owners or shareholders?
Okay.
So let's say when you increase your revenue increases, okay, you can curtail certain expenses and your profit increases. That's going to push the shareholders. So overall, and when there is an incremental thing, there's always a push, but driven further to go for achieve bigger targets.
And that is good in the case of revenue, but in the case of a cost,
you have to cut it.
You have to look at that. If it is always people think of incremental, we always go with the mindset that you go and increase on top of what we already have. Like turnover wise, yes. So therefore, yes, we have to increase, but we got to be careful. Any other points? That's good point. Anything else?
Always there the potential.
Okay.
We have to make the decision very carefully whether we are trying to achieve something above the potential. So here, what is the what are the cost factors and other expenditures we have to incur and whether it's beyond our capacity.
Okay. So then, how does this incremental come up to the picture?
So incremental budgeting should not exceed the potential. It is beyond the capacity.
Two things. Okay, good point. Let us say you take the turnover. When you have an incremental budgeting, sometimes, yes, you may be in a saturated situation. If it is a saturated situation, that continuously, if it is turnover, continuously keeping on increasing, and that may go beyond your capacity. Capacity in the sense practical limitation. So then it may not be achievable. That is one side of it. But then it can happen other way as well. You keep on increasing by percentage, but your potential can be so pretty big. But you think that okay, in the past you have achieved 10% growth, the 15% growth is fantastic. But probably in the market there may be 30% growth. So it could happen either way. So therefore, in terms of revenue side, yes, the potential versus the reality, you may be seriously underestimating or you can be seriously overestimating. Both ways it can happen. You can say something. Right. So that is true. But in terms of cost, what happens is you put that framework. Now everybody thinks that okay, last year to this year we can add an increment, which may be 1%, 2%, 5%, 10%, right? And then you may say okay, instead of the company norm is 10%, someone comes and say I can manage it with 5% increase. You will be very happy. But to see that is an extent that you could have reduced, right? So therefore, it is very important that when you do that is an incremental thinking that you have, which may not be the right thing. But of course, we'll discuss them in detail. Positives are that managers need not spend a lot of time and money when preparing the budget. Like say, it is an incremental budgeting, so it's not a very detailed exercise. Yes, you will be looking at the past data, all those things that you are looking at. But it is at the end of the day, you have a set of figures, and based on all your analysis, you may add a certain percentage, right? That is how you may do it. But of course, at that percentage, you may have to do a lot of working behind, but still it is relatively simpler. And then, simple and convenient approach for stable and consistent business environment. Why do I say it is good for stable and consistent environment? time when you are going through a lot of positive sentiment, also that is not going to work. Because then what's going to happen is that you are going to have leap increases, like you are going to have 30%, 40% increase in the volume, drastic changes into the businesses that are going to happen in environment. So then, I think simple percentages, you can't do it, because you need to radically look at, okay, if you are going to move from this level to another level, so then what are the things that we would do differently? Certain things, investing in a machine, for example, which is not economical at a given volume, may not be economical for a certain volume, but if you are going to double the volume, that may be a very feasible thing. Get the point? Right. So therefore, you may be looking at things which are completely different. At the same time, certain things like say reduction in staff under normal circumstances, the company may not be considering. But a pandemic situation, a company should have never considered reduction in staff, permanent staff, may think of reducing the permanent staff. Okay. So therefore, the point here is that it is a very simple, the stable business environment, the increment budgeting will be actually good enough. But if it is a drastic changes like we've been discussing, so then this cannot facilitate situations like that. Right? So that is therefore stable and consistent environment, this is suitable. Criticism, no incentive for developing new ideas. So if it is just setting an increment, you are not very bothered, like how you can do, what things that you can do differently, because everybody is okay to have a couple of percentage increase and it is anyway getting approved. So you don't have to really bother to see whether I am doing the right thing, whether this is the best thing that I am going to do. Right? You don't have to, because increment is always accepted. Right? Also, people may simply use the past period figures as a base and increase by a percentage rather than taking time to evaluate the areas. So you just look at the figures and you just put an added percentage and then take that as a budget. You don't really look at things through thinking time to see whether you are doing the right thing or the best possible thing. Also, there is another thing. Use it or lose it approach, where entire current budget is utilized not to lose it for the next year. What is it? Use it or lose it approach? Any idea? Say you have a budget. The company has a setup. Okay, you always get an increment to the current year budget. Right? And then let us say you have been given a budget, say a maintenance budget. You got a maintenance budget or some budget. Okay, it's going to be 1 million rupees is your maintenance budget for the year. Right? And then say January, December organization, by the time it comes to August, September, you see your actual spending on maintenance is only 500,000. Right? The actual spending is say 500,000, which much less. And then even if you do everything right, with another 100,000, no 150,000 rupees, you can still achieve what you are supposed to achieve. Right? But then you achieve it with 150,000 and so 650,000. Your original budget is 1 million. You do it with 650,000 rupees. Yes, this year, if you really try to perform, yes, you may do that. But then what happens is when you go for the next year budget review, right, you are not getting an increment from 1 million, but you are getting an increment from 650,000. Because the manager or the CEO will ask, if you could do it with 650,000 last year, why do you need 1.1 million? So that may not be allowed. So therefore, what can happen in organizations, it actually happens, so then people might think it is not really necessarily maintenance work. But still you spend that and you come close to the budget but keep it below the budget. Right? So that because the next year budget it will make your life easier. And sometimes of course what happens in certain organizations that now any fact it's the marketing area also there, production is also there. Maintenance, consumables, spare parts, so these things are not very clearly defined. They are industry specific, certain industry. So in that case, something else which is not clearly maintenance, you may put into the maintenance budget and say, okay, or somewhere else that you are spending, overspending, if you just convince the person who is putting the entry, okay, no, it is made into this and you may success in it, right? So that, because otherwise if you don't get it, you may lose it. You see that happening, right? So that can always happen, right? So when it comes to finance, people are really smart in negotiating with the finance. And the finance also will have to negotiate, look at things in the same way. I've been at the last, my main the operation involvement, I've been involved in preparing the budget. So we had about 10 different factories operating in 4 different countries, right? And working with these people, they are very smart. And I mean, when they want to do something, they will not come. Before coming to the budget, they may plan and they may come and sit with you in the lunch and they will say, in a casual, they may say these difficulties are there and all that. And then they get you thinking thinking, okay, no, this is the way, this guy is really in difficulty. So that when it comes to budget, okay, you tend to believe that he's telling the truth. Right? There are bad people that they will going to perform, but they will do it. And sometimes they say, no, this capacity is not enough. Sometimes that happens. Like there was one guy also saying that was a, I think, spreader or a cutter. He had wanted to buy a new thing, and he was saying, okay, it is always capacity is not there. We can't really manage that. So what he is, occasionally when I go there in the night, I used to work till late, 9:30, 10 in the night. I'll just casually step in there and see what is going to happen, and just to see that the machine is not actually working. It is not capacity utilized. So because but he had wanted to convince, so you can convince with the numbers. So therefore, it is always good. Both sides will have to be vigilant. Finance people have to be extra careful, right? So,
the third point, with the experience, what should be the correct approach?
No.
If the budget is 1 million,
yeah.
they are ending particularly 650,000. For next year budgeting, it is advisable to reduce 3.5 or 700 or something.
No, this thing is actually now what doesn't happen is in the organization you have to operate with a certain amount of level of trust. That understanding should come in. If you have that understanding, so then probably it is always again like say, even if this is a department you preparing the budget and as an executive say someone is going to budget to the manager, so the both parties will know we can't be too tight because we should be able to achieve the budget. Right? But you may not understand, you not have the proper understanding between the executive manager, there can be buffer. Right? And then manager takes to the financial controller. Financial controller also doesn't want to be too ambitious and have a very difficult budget. Because he is answerable at the end of the day for the budget that is presented to the board. Right? So then the manager, the executive might keep a buffer with the manager and manager will keep another buffer with the financial controller. So then there is another buffer that is going to come in, and then when everything is taken there, let us say the CEO is going to review that, right? And then CEO also wants to be comfortable, right? So then before you take it to the board, and there can be another buffer that can come. Like this all that happens. So therefore, then what is going to happen is finally what you see as a budgeted figure versus the reality is actually not that. There's a huge disparity. There's a gap. Like say the potential versus actual, there's a huge disparity. It will make your life comfortable as a person who is going to supposed to deliver it because there is a buffer. But at the same time, in terms of organizational potential, and let us say if the competitor is doing the right thing and if you are not doing the right thing, basically you get into unknowingly you get into a cost structure which is too high, and it will seriously affect your erode your profitability in the long term.
Incremental budgeting only that happens. Instead of last year we had 650,000, budget was 1 million, we managed to 650. So like I said, on an incremental budgeting, if you say okay 10% and on 650 only they will increase.
Yeah.
If you really want to do a proper budget like you were just explaining, then you will go into see, okay, we budgeted 1 million, we spent 650. What were the components of that 650?
Exactly.
Maybe there would have been an expense we anticipated which didn't come.
Exactly.
So, but still next year it will
may
slowly come.
Yeah.
In maintenance. So then we have to, although 650 we will still say 1 million or 1.2 million because last year that particular machine we were expecting some kind of a yes, or it didn't happen.
Yeah.
So that's the actual correct.
Yeah, exactly.
Under criticism this is right.
Yeah. So you need one is that the task actually that I mentioned, the other one is actually the level of detail that you go into. Like and then actually figuring it out what has gone really, what has not, what has conquered this gap.
It is advisable to beginning of the year. It is advisable to commission a report. Okay, if you keep your cost down this much, you will get this much of percentage. But the real achievement has to be there. So it is advisable that kind of.
Yeah, you can do it, but only thing is this can work very well. But only thing you got to have the first when you commit these things, negotiate, commit these things, you got to be really have control on top of the numbers. So if you negotiate and get the right thing in the right way, yes, definitely that is going to be better. But that's going to be better outcome. But only thing is if you don't realize, only one party knows what is going to happen. Sometimes the person is going to give the approval, you very well know, no, this worker can't achieve this. But he will say, okay, he's going to say
achieve that benefit is for the party.
Yeah, that is the revenue. I think cost also you can work the same way.
So even cost for the department is same, no? No, if the department head is given a task, okay, you have to manage your expenses by 1 million, and if it okay, you manage within 900,000, out of the 100, you will get a percentage. In that way, the manager can
There
control.
are some occasions and some organizations, okay, they was first 6 months. Then they release their first 6 months and if there's anything, they will cut down and
Revise the budget.
Then no savings at all. The budgets are very tough.
Yeah, that is true. That is thing. So then that is actually because now we will be towards the end of this we will be having a quick discussion on that. So the behavioral implications are very, very important. Because for people, most organizations, that is the organization that I work for, achieving the budget is a big thing. To achieve the budget, you are going to get rewarded, and that is very important. That is very important in people's personal life. You may want to buy a new vehicle, or buy a new house, or you want to go on a foreign trip. All that you may be planning based on the incremental and the bonus, right? So therefore, you try to manipulate too much. Like you should make it tight to the right level. Should not be overly tight. Because if it is overly tight, if people just trying to believe that okay, this project is not achievable.
It should be realistic, no?
Then people will give up, no? They will try to do something and may mark the day. Mark the day and just ensure their survival. But then they will not work hard to achieve that. So therefore, you push it over. So then again, in terms of performance, you will not get the desired performance. So that is the thing. So if everybody believes that okay, now pushing this little bit is there, but then the rewards that they were many things in the world depending on the rewards that they are not going to be, you are going to be deprived of something that you would have otherwise got because of this division. So then as long as you do it collectively, then that should be okay.
For example, in a production or tangible product sales, for example, FMCG or electronics and things like that, your revenue you can increase in any way. When you come to looking at banking services or even insurance, you can't overly do it also because what happens is say in lending, you tell okay, you increase your lending, they start giving with wrong credit. Just for the sake of lending to the company is going to lose. Same in terms of an insurance, you go in wrong sales, your product, you start getting more claims, you're going to get affected. So it differs from...
It is a mix, so that is why, okay, now it's a thing. So now you have financial budget is one thing, but along with the financial budget, you need to have the right KPI. What are the critical success factors for your business survival and the sustainable growth? So then you need to have the budget from one side, and then also along with that you have to have the right set of KPIs. If that is there, so then it is not going to happen. The movement is not going to be there. And answering your question again, not many organizations may say if you save cost, you are not going to give budget, give additional reward, but you may say this is your standard, but then if your profit is more than this, more than exceed the budget by 10%, 20% or 30%, then you may get additional reward. So therefore, it collectively look at the revenue cost the combination. That is the most likely thing that will happen. I think your bank has it like that.
Yes.
How it is it?
120 we have to achieve the branch wise and the bank wise. But both of them are achieved, then only we go to the not the June and December bonus. We are having extra bonus for 4 times of salary on February. That was what happened. Due to that.
No, anybody in the back will tell you because I don't know that that's right. So, no, that's okay. No, that's
very rewarding.
That's it. No, so basically you have 6 months performance, you get a particular reward,
Yes.
but then collectively, the branch also achieve beyond a certain beyond a particular budget, and if the company also in overall achieves that, then those branches will be getting very attractive performance.
Also those budgets are very realistic. I don't think they will over budget and expect to do sun and moon there, no? The budget should be
the margin they have fixed
realistic one.
Yes.
So, and that way you can now, if say the capacity is 100 and they expect to do 150 to get that, no. That's okay, go up to 110 or 120. No?
Yeah, lots of things actually we can't discuss it because you need to keep stretching the target, but at the same time you keep stretching continuously, overstretching. After a couple of years, you get saturated, and the entire system will be fatigued, and you can't go beyond that, and people will be demotivated. So it has to be handled very, very, very carefully. Nothing is short term, and the people responsible unless
you need to grow like muscle, not fat.
exactly. Okay, right. So I think good discussion. So then other thing is last point under this is current inefficiencies are continued into the future. Whatever that you do wrong, if you are still allowed to add a percentage and continue, so then whatever that you don't do right also will continue. You can add still a percentage to that. So therefore you are not compelled to come up with new thinking. And outcome, the next also, which like you were mentioning certain elements of that, we call it zero-based budgeting. So zero-based budgeting is whenever you prepare a budget, you are not going to take anything for granted. Like you said, you look at that, your current volume and what is the growth that you are going to have and what is the trend that you have been having in the past and what are the external price increases. So based on that, you had a percentage. Right? So then you had say your current year figure was 1 million, next year figure is 1.2 million. Right? But you don't know the component that has gone into this 1.2 million. You only know that whether 1.2 million per annum, 100,000 per month, whether you achieve that 100,000 or not is what you know. Right? And then if there is a significant deviation, you may look at, okay, what particular item, what particular event, aspect has led to this overspending or underspending. But you don't have individually within that what is inside that 100,000 per month or 1 million per month, 1.2 million per year, you don't know. Right? But zero-based budgeting is not that. Actually, your budget is actually based on a model. It is the model that we use is Excel model. Right? So every item of expenditure is built up on an Excel model through equations and the formula, and you have a model, and that will give you what is going to be your final thing. Let us say you want to plan the foreign travel budget. There are a company which has a lot of foreign travel. Right? Incremental budget will tell you, okay, your current year foreign travel amount is so much, and this year you are planning for so much of growth, and this year planning for a couple of trade fairs or whatever like that to actually add something, and this is going to be a foreign travel budget for next year. So you do that is fine. But that is incremental budgeting. You are not irrational, but you don't go into the real detail. But if you do a zero-based budget, you won't do it like that. You have the foreign travel budget, like how many visits are you going to plan, how many customer visits, how many suppliers, how many trade fairs, and how many technology, whatever the transfers, and how many training. You have the number of visits, and then which class, how many people are going to go, and which class are they going to fly, and how many days are they going to stay, and what is their hotel fees, the transportation, and the subsistence, and all of those things. And then you will put an Excel module, and Excel module, and then there's a comprehensive worksheet, and it's a matter of putting that and see, okay, if you do all these steps together, this is going to be how much is going to be your foreign travel budget for this year. If it is 2 months, say what are the non-essential things, what are the things that we can cut down, or can we change the number of trips, can we reduce the number of days in each visit, or can you stay in a different type of hotel. So you look at that in the budgeting stage itself, you work it out, and you will do that. Right? Correct. Then there is a more detailed one. Right? Let us say the electricity budget. The same way, you are going to prepare the electricity budget. Last year electricity budget has been so much, actual spending has been so much, and next year CEB is going to plan say 5% increase, and then of course you are going to increase the 10% volume increase. So considering all of that, so 13% increase, you are going to plan the electricity cost and 13% increase. That is a incremental budgeting. Zero-based budgeting? No. You take your electricity budget, you take the electricity bill for the past 12 months, and what has been your kilowatt hour consumption, what has been your kVA consumption, what has been the rate, and how many hours of generator running, and how many hours of working, and then what are the machinery and the equipment that has able to consume electricity. So then based on that, you put up a model again. With considering all these elements, you put up a model to say that, okay, this is how your electricity bill is accumulated. Right? And then when you do that, you can then look at, okay, our kilowatt hours and our tariff system is not the, you may realize our tariff system is not the right tariff system. We have to change the tariff system. Or else say, yes, this particular time of the year, our electricity rate, tariff rate is too much. Why can't we run the generator during that time? Right? Or else why can't we use our roof? Or why can't we have natural lighting? All those ideas will come in the moment when you start looking at it. Okay, so the point is that it is good. Theoretically it is good, but what is the negative side? It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of time, and you need resources. You need people who are competent, and then it takes time. So you can't do that in a hurry. So each new budget begins from a zero base as if it is prepared for the first time. And each budget cycle starts with a critical review of every assumption and proposed expenditure. You don't just put a figure. You look at what are the assumptions behind them, and then only you take that item. And then managers are forced to do an in-depth analysis of each item, objectives, alternatives, justification, and all that, and developing the budget can be very much time-consuming and costly. take time. It can be costly as well. The time, that when it takes time means that it will be costly, right? That is another aspect. So therefore, but then the value is like what I mentioned, right? So the point here is that if you have completely incremental budget, so then that may not give you the take you the desired point. At the same time, if it is a completely zero-based budget, some organizations can do that, provided they can afford to have that time and the quality of people, but still it is cost. Right, it is not the people who are preparing the budget. To do that, you are having meetings with the sales manager, marketing manager, warehouse manager, production manager. People are all in all these discussions and meetings. So that is cost to the organization, right? So that is what you need to balance. But then a good option would be to manage, get the best side of both things. Let us say if you won't do it for your company or the part of the department, you take all the costs. Let us say you have 15 line items that you're budgeting for in your department, right? You put them a list and you rank them, zero to analysis. What are the top 5% of the items, right? What are the lowest 5% of the items? So you look at, and then you pick the most significant items, and then for that you spend that time and you go through and you do a real in-depth analysis, the zero-based budget. But let us say these are very insignificant small items, you're not going to spend a lot of time. Very quickly you can just add a percentage to those. But so therefore you do some sort of Pareto and then look at especially what are the most significant items in terms of value, put more effort on that. Insignificant item you don't put the same effort. Number one. Number two, certain items the value may not be very significant, but it may be very critical to the business operation. Sometimes say some quality related things, right? I mean the cost may not be very significant, but if things doesn't happen rightly, it may have a serious impact on the organization. So therefore you can pick those items, and those things you can go really into the detail and do a zero-based budget. Otherwise you may just have an increment and do it. So you can have a blend of the blend between the two. That is that. Okay. Right. So that's the initial part of the discussion, and then another thing is now so that is clear, right? Incremental versus zero-based budget. And then also another aspect is that now when we prepare the budgets in organization, like where do you get the initial, figure? Okay, in the sense that okay, what level of turnover you should achieve, or what level of profit that you expect, or what level of margin, or the market share, or the ROI, or the market growth. So where do you get this initial primary parameters for the calculate the achievable? Where do you get it from? Who gives that those figures? Finance. Who else?
Market analytics is stock market, financial report of other similar companies doing that.
Okay, who do that again? Right, this may be finance. So many organizations, actually a lot of things related to the budget may be given either certain organizations, if it is very, chairman driven, the founder driven type of organization, most of the things will come from there. And some certain organizations you have very strong board, right? So then it may come from the board level. Certain organizations, it may not be the board, may not be very strong, but it may be the CEO or the managing director is going to be the strongest person. So then it may come from that end, or else it can come from the finance department, or else the top management team may get together and say, okay, this is what we do to achieve. But whatever the element, the way we look at this sort of the driving, that drive that comes from the top of the organization, we call that the top-down approach to budget, right? So it is coming from the top. The top of the organization drives the budget, and then the rest of the team, from board to the managing director to the department head to the subordinate, so it trickles down from the top level of the organization. So that's the approach to budgeting we will call top-down approach to the budgeting. Direction for budget comes from senior management and then passed on to the operation level, and the targets are somewhat imposed on the lower levels of the organization used by groups of companies and multinationals. Okay, so this is what probably happens. But most of in your organization, do you adopt the methods like this? How does it happen?
Now this in senior management
Or the board, high.
so now even large companies, the senior management is like the discuss strategic plan and then propose it to the board saying that okay, this is our plan for the year, and then they approve it.
Okay. And the management, when you decide how, what is the process? When the management look at
So that's the there's a management team. So they all the department heads come together and have a discussion on okay, what is our plan for the year. That plan they put it to the board. Once it gets approved, it's given down to the operational level to implement.
implement that. Anything else how it happens?
No. Same way, but I have a question now. Actually, what the profit level, how they are targeting? They say depends on the expenditure, profitability and everything. So the profitability or turnover ratio, how they are taking components, even chairman.
It depends actually. It depends. Now sometimes, say entrepreneur-driven organization, sometimes they may not be rational. Like maybe that person's gut feeling. Probably that would have worked all his lifetime. Right? Sometimes it may happen like that. But certain other instances, it may happen by you may do some sort of external evaluation like market research and then trend analysis and the economic input. Certain things you may look at them based on that at the board level. When you do it, sometimes it may happen like that. It could actually vary from organization to organization how it is going to come. But sometimes with regard to the multinational, it may not happen even that way. Like say sometimes it may be that globally that let us say a multinational which is operating in so many different business segments and they want to look at okay this particular vertical area. They want to look at okay if you have to be in this area, this is like 5-year, 10-year prospect for this particular business segment and this and it is not going to be worthwhile unless we get this much of ROI. Right? So they might look at then so they may set a timeline 1 to 2 to 3 years and they may push it very hard. Right? Whether they can get it there. If they get it there, they will continue that. Otherwise, they'll either sell that to another party or they will dissolve or whatever they will do. So they are very specially, it doesn't happen in this part of the world, but in the US and all the developed markets, that is very big. It's all driven by numbers. Nothing to do with the sentiments, nothing to do with the people's feeling, factors, nothing. It's just the numbers. You do it and then you give it and you give to an investment plan to find a buyer or split that company and sell it. So like that. So there, we see even in Sri Lanka, some of the multinationals which were operating very well in Sri Lankan terms, but they were not interested about those businesses. They just cut out the business, slowly talk to someone, so they just went off. So they operate in a completely different manner. It could vary. And then at the same time, there are certain organizations, like I mentioned, it may be not necessarily driven by the top, but it is even the managers when they do it, they may not be doing it alone. Before they do that, they may have discussions with their sales teams and within the department and they may take that information to the senior management. So there, the strong element is that not that top is going to come and tell you, like in a multinational or even bank, it is very, very much top driven. But here, the lower level, you will look at certain things and then it gets built up on from lower level to the higher level. So we call that a bottom-up approach to budget. So
there are some actually now when it comes to entrepreneur-driven company or like you said the founder-based driven, so he has an idea, he wants, okay, I need to achieve this. So that he will put it down, somehow or the other just to achieve. Like you said, going from bottom, what happens is, okay, the management will give their proposal, so what the board or the chairman, they have to come to a realistic ground, that only finally gets approved.
Yeah. That is more bottom-up and then most importantly, sometimes it can be negotiated.
Yes.
Like, then it goes up and down. But the point is that even with entrepreneurs gut feeling, sometimes they are very sensible and sensitive, and then they keep adjusting. Say after 1 year they may try hard, and the second year it doesn't come, so they need to adjust. Right? So that's good, adaptable. But then some people are continuous for years they don't achieve that, but still they keep pushing. So then this is a completely failure because then it's not going to work in the longer term. Because he is not responsive to like he doesn't see through what is happening. Like probably he may not trust his team to say that okay they are doing their best. Still think he feels if I push it a little bit further they can do it. So he will not get it.
Because now, for example, last year for insurance it was a good year in terms of profitability. But now this year we can't say the same. Last year the vehicles didn't move, there were less accidents and all due to COVID. So profitability was high for insurance companies. This year if they go on incremental plan, they're in trouble. Because last year losses were, but this year we're anticipating more losses. That means we can't.
We can see that the number of the experience, the COVID, the far exceeding the COVID days.
So, I mean, you have to, this year the budget proposition will change.
Actually, we were thinking about not only the vehicle insurance, but the health insurance also is going to be the case, right?
Health insurance last was less. Yeah. I mean, hardly people went to hospital for, I think hardly people fell sick.
Yeah.
So, serious, last year, I think I didn't fall sick for the whole, I hope I don't fall sick. Kerala, Katayama, but I'm the most, I think 90% of the people, were quite healthy.
They were eating healthy.
Huh? Eating healthy and,
Eating healthy, living healthy, and moving and
More
wearing the
family
mask.
time.
Okay, so that is top-down approach to budgeting. So the positives is senior management has a clear idea about the company's strategic direction and the budgets are made more aligned to the strategy. So that is always strategy driven. Top level, the overall long-term vision and the strategy driven always, because it is coming from the top. So it is in a structured corporate. And then at the same time, they better understand the impact of the macro environmental factors, industry environment and the computer strategy. So they are in a better position, they understand what is happening. In the past, what has been happening, and then in the global economy, if you have an impact, so how it is going to impact your business, and the national, whatever economy, the Sri Lankan or the particular locality, how it is going to have an impact, and then what are going to be the likely action of the competitors, and then how that will impact your business. Now, all those things can be very properly synthesized properly, especially if there is a proper senior management. So then it can be a very realistic thing as well, if that is going to be the case, right? So that is a good side of it. Right? But the negative side, like we were looking at, operational targets may be forced upon the lower levels, resulting in lack of commitment and from the rest of the organization. So like this, always the chairman says, okay, or the board says, okay, this is what you want to achieve, but you can't achieve that. You can never achieve that. Then of course, when the rate is lower, then people, there is no reason for people to achieve that, because they know that he is always coming up with, or the board is always coming up with something which is nobody is not achievable. So then it is just become a formality that you need to have a budget. For the sake of having a budget, you may have a budget. Nobody bothers about it. That's what can happen. Huh?
Really?
It depends. Now, the organization that I look for. Huh?
No, sir, cut the long story short, because we are discussing more things and your system is not moving. It starts from the bottom level. In very big sentences, which start from the bottom level and it goes to the top. So whatever the budgeting we do, okay, finally there is a if it is 1.5 billion, okay, we want 2 billion, make the budget, adjust the budget according to the profit.
Okay, that's the problem.
So whatever calculations we do, finally we have cut down the cost, almost all the cost. Totally saving. So P1, P2 and some strategies we have to apply.
No, that is there, but now actually it happens in most things, but now we have some experience in some of the areas. So we had a very, I think I had a fantastic team, and we had a very good numbers oriented management the time that I was especially in the private sector. And then, but we of course, like there is a need. They might say, okay, we need it so much of profit you will need. But then when you work it out, if it is not coming there, again that achievement also can come up with a collective exercise. I remember in 2002 when we were doing the initial budget, the situations were so tight those days, the quota situation in the country and all that, we were actually nowhere near the budget that we want to achieve. And then we set a target of $1 million saving in that year. That time $1 million was a big target. And then we had about a 10-day period, right? And we got each and every manager with the senior management team come to the boardroom, right? They present their budget. And we did a zero-based budgeting. Anyway, we had all the Excel worksheets there, we had the details. And you come and, if it is your budget, you come and present it, right? And then your manager will say depending. And then everybody else looking at that and they will discuss it. And then you see sometimes it may be somebody's, some HR budget, but maybe supply chain manager has a fantastic high and come out with the review, right? And then okay, thinking that okay, so we have achieved so much and we want to do it. At the same time, people will change all the negative things and they may come out the thing. So therefore, yes, I mean, for it can not that it cannot be done, but then many things should be synchronized for it to happen properly. Otherwise, like you said, yes. And finally, what will happen is, like you said, whatever that you do it, finally it will boil down to the case. Okay, the strategy is there, long-term plan, vision, all that is there, but you need a 50% increase in the bottom line, and then do the budget for that. So then everything is lost. That also can happen. But only thing is, if you are driving this, the more you understand it, more that you can contribute at least to change and get things moving better. Right? So therefore, operating targets may force upon the lower level result lack of commitment and too ambitious and may not consider ground level reality. It is driven from the top. Can be very ambitious. You don't not bother about what is going to happen. You get a immediate outcome. Right? Other approach is bottom-up approach. Like we said, it comes from the lower level and roll it up. Positive is that it creates ownership and commitment at the operation level. Like if it is operation level who gets together and come up with this, and then of course you get the ownership because your voice is heard and your concerns are taken into account, and then operational staff better exposed to the ground level reality, so their input is considered valuable and high motivation towards the achievement. So if it is bottom up, yes, there are a lot of positive things that can happen, especially in terms of commitment towards the achievement of the budget. There are a lot of positives. However, tendency to commit comfortable and achievable as against the challenging budget. So that is there. Let's take a salesperson, right? You have a certain X amount of sales, right? And then always say they will achieve 10% increment is there, and then okay, he is going to say okay, I'm going to achieve 15%, and then very well knowing that no, it is not 15%, I can very well achieve 30%, but you want to commit only 15% more, and then you at the end of the day you are set everything to achieve 30% more, and you will be a real star performer, right? So there is under commit and over deliver. So that is the you commit less and you deliver more. So then that is the other side. But there is a serious problem with that, especially in trading organizations as well as manufacturing organizations. This happens. No, the salespeople are under commit and then they try to over deliver. But what happens is they say when they commit a certain volume and the entire organization is geared for this volume. And then suddenly they will come and say, no, I have this order, I need more capacity. It happens. So then people are not clear. You can't give capacity overnight. And then they will come and say, you always complain that you are not going to have sales. Now we bring sales, you can't take those sales. Now there is a continuous struggle with the organization. That is because you are not honest and you don't tell what is going to really happen. But then the rest of the organization is not clear. If it is manufacturing capacity is not adjusted to that. You don't have enough people to recruit that. Your warehouse is not enough. And your working capital is not there. So therefore there can be a lot of strain on the system. So therefore tendency to commit comfortable, achievable target as against a challenging budget is a problem. And then budgets can be too operational and may not capture the strategic goals. That is also there. If it is too operational, if it is always coming from the operational level, they may do a very operational, very realistic, solid thing, but they may not be able to see the bigger picture. Right? So as a result of which, certain opportunities may be missed, or certain steps may not be considered, and you may still have an unrealistic budget. They are genuine efforts and get a very good budget, but it's very operational budget, not very strategic and not very macro-oriented budget. Okay? Right. So that is that. And then comes this area. Do you have any of your organizations do you have what you call flexible budget? Have you heard of this term, fixed budgets and flexible budgets? What most organizations do have are fixed budgets. Where you set a budget saying that if it is a manufacturing organization, we are trying to sell this much of quantity, or this is the volume, or this is the amount of revenue, or this is the number of premium insurance policies, and this is the average whatever the premium level. So like that, so you may have a particular level, this many kilos of whatever the product, like that you will be having. So then it is budget is prepared for that level, and when it comes to the reviews and all that, you are comparing that fixed budget as against the actual result that has been achieved. But some organizations may set the budget in such a way that you have a fixed budget, but in your budget you will identify if my volume changes, these are the costs that are going to change, and this is the relationship between the budget and the volume, right? So therefore, when it comes to actual performance, you may not be considering the original budget entire year, but you will adjust the budget. Do any one of your organizations have you follow that?
The intention of achieving more profit through controlling the losses. Flexible budget.
No, to make I objectively not either of them. It is to getting the right budget. Pricing the budget is the depending on the changes in the circumstances, what should be the rightful yardstick. So then here you are not changing all the parameters, just the volume only. Now you are only changing the volume.
But it doesn't happen always. Like now, classic example is again COVID. When we did the budget in March or January last year, we had growth of X amount. Since COVID came in, then there are a lot of regulation and implications that came in. Then the budget was adjusted accordingly.
Right.
Because we have aggressive budget, so then it got adjusted. But it's not that it's a normal way of doing the budget. So in order to make it it come realistically. Otherwise, we'll have a budget and it's not going to be realistic with our performance. It will look very bad. So, management, they agreed to adjust the budget during the
Scenario. Right. Okay. Now again we will just come to that later, how to manage the uncertainty, how to do the budget in conditions of uncertainty, uncertain scenario. Now here it may not be the company's practice to do it in that manner, but when you come up with a pricing as an alternative, you revise your budget. Right? This is something which is more than that. Your budgeting system is such a manner, you may be operating in a very volatile market. Right? In terms of due to the raw material availability, sometimes your volume may be drastically affected. Like always government reduction, sometimes certain industries are affected by quota. Sometimes the government may be putting certain restrictions. Like that, if there are things, especially there can be things that are completely beyond your control, which can affect your performance. So then you keep a budget and then compare it against that this budget may not be realistic and may not be very objective also. So if it is not very objective, the whole purpose is lost. So therefore, flexible budget is basically setting the budget in such a way that depending on the volume, you can adjust it. And more suitable, like I again repeating, for organizations where the volumes are not uncertain. The volumes can fluctuate. Right? So that is what it means by a flexible budget. Right? Okay. And then there's a flexible budget. So simple to use in no room for ambiguity. Fixed budget is a budget and no room for ambiguity. Your budget is budget. No more discussions on the budget once it is approved until the end of the year. Right? And then since the budget is kept constant at a particular level of activity, is not a good yardstick to compare the performance under dynamic market conditions. So therefore the negative side is that. On the other hand, flexible budgets, right, budgets which are adjusted for changes in the volume and other cost driven activities, parameters are set in a way such that it can be adjusted for any activity level. When the activity level changes, you can adjust it. Master budget still kept at the original benchmark. Here the problem is that which budget is going to be used for your bonuses, incentives and the increments is going to be a problem. Right? So unless you have it properly, so there can be endless discussions to see, okay, by how much it should be adjusted. So then it has to be a problem. But if you do it in a proper manner, at the time of setting the budget itself, you should have the criteria, these are the circumstances in which you are going to revise the budget, the parameters, the volume, and this is how you are going to do it. Sometimes before you know whether it's going to be an adverse or a positive thing, you set the parameter very objectively, and then probably more things can happen objectively. Right? Of course, this is easy to say, but difficult to do when it comes to the real life implementation. But now you have an idea of what is fixed budget and what is the flexible budget. Right? And then also we speak of periodic budgets and the rolling budget. Have you come across this rolling budget? A periodic budget is a budget that we usually do. Say it is a January business organization. In the month of January, you get the budget done for the next 12 months. Right? So then you keep reviewing in January, February, March, April, May, like that you keep reviewing. By September, October, you start doing the new year budget. Right? And then by December, November, late December, you have the budget for the next year. So that is the periodic budget. You do it for a particular period. What is the rolling budget? Alternative is the rolling budget. Do you all have, probably not many organizations will have rolling budgets, but do you all have rolling sales forecast? No. Well, not having. Some organizations, probably not service industries, but the Now say, let us say we have a rolling budget which is a quarterly rolling budget, right? Now what we do is, so let us say it is a quarterly, they don't have a monthly budget, it's a quarterly budget. Let us say Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4. Beginning of the year, you set the budget for the 4 quarters, your quarterly budget, which will make up the annual budget, right? And come to the end of the first quarter, you will see what has actually happened within the first quarter, right? And based on the learning, you will make fine-tune, not major changes, make little changes to the budgets in the second, third and the fourth quarter, right? Q2, Q3, Q4 you make changes, and then you are going to add the next year's first quarter also into the budget. You are going to add the next year first quarter also into the budget. So now again you will have one full year's budget, right, at the end of the first quarter. And then again at the end of the second quarter you will make minor changes to probably Q3 and Q4 budget, right? But then you make modifications to this Q1 and you bring in the Q4 as well, right? So always you will have 4 quarters of budget, right? Now here you may be making minor modifications, but at the end of this thing you are going to bring in another quarter, right? So it becomes sort of a regular. One moment. Okay, that's okay. We'll continue for another couple of minutes and we'll stop for a bit. Now, do you understand what I mentioned? So, but don't you organizing this? You must be at least having sales forecast. You don't have rolling forecast. You don't have. Now, otherwise, what happens is, now let us say, now certain businesses, your business operating cycle is longer. Let us say for you to get an order and communicate that to the supplier and get the lead times to get whatever the material or whatever, and then execute the order, it can take longer period, not just 1 to 2 months period, but it can take 4 to 5 months. Like your order book, you need to see your order book and the status for a longer period. So in businesses like that, if you have an annual budget, say by the time you come to the end of this year, until this period, you will not see the next 6 months to next year's budget. Right? So then what happens is, when it by the time it comes to say the third quarter, the fourth quarter of a particular year, you should know what is going to be your status in the next year first quarter. Otherwise you can't plan your operation. There are some businesses like that. The garment industry like that. You need to know your order book at least 6 months ahead. So then only you know whether your orders are going to get filled, and then you need to take action. Whether that is there, if you have more capacity, if you have a lot of more orders coming in, then you need to figure out where you need to put them. And if you don't get the orders, you need to work out with the other customers too and figure out where you are going to get the orders. So therefore, rolling forecast is going to be quite useful when the business cycle and the business operating cycle is longer. Otherwise, by the time you get there's some organization you will see towards the end of the year, last couple of months is an inactive period. People don't want to do anything because there is no budget. And that is because you have to wait until the next year budget is approved.
Government, apparel industries,
yeah, they may
in cooling down period where they low budget and so I think they don't have orders during the
Yeah.
new year and something.
Yeah. There's a completely different story, but I will touch upon that. There's a completely different industry. Yes, that will happen, but even otherwise, the point here is that you will have a not very active decision individual period until the budget is that I'm saying. You can't do any expansion, you can't go and do whatever that is required to get the anticipated demand, or if there is a problem to overcome that, you can't do anything because until the budget is approved. It has to come from the budget. But if you have a regular quarterly rolling budget, so then you will know, okay, if this is the case, you have a plan to achieve that. That is what you mean by rolling budget.
Business continuity plan?
No, it's not continuity plan. It's actually part of the operational plan. I mean, you not having a budget, now let us say not having a budget till the last moment, your operating cycle is longer, so then the next operating cycle action you can't take without having a proper budget. So therefore you have to always have a certain number of months ahead in the budget. So that is why you may roll the budget. Actually the sales and the capacity budget you may be rolling, so that you have an idea what sort of commitment that you need to make. Right? Just one last thing, I think 159 is one last thing, and then also in organization it's got short-term budget and long-term budget. Right? What you mean by a short-term budget is what we all do. You prepare the budget for a year. Annual budget you call it short-term budget. Right? Of course, doing a short-term budget itself is so much difficult because there are so many things that may not happen based on the reality. But a long-term budget is a budget which is prepared for a longer time period, maybe for 3-year period or a 4 or 5-year period. Right? Now, so do you have experiences in your organization seeing a long-term budget? The budget which is prepared not for 1 year, but for a longer period. Not all the organizations may have it, but what sort of experience you have?
No, we do a 3-year plan.
3-year plan, 3-year financial plan. Is it a detailed financial plan or a high level? High level. Some organizations, most organizations, that is happen. So you may have, because why, what is the reason? Okay, you can have 1 year budget, always you can have 1 year budget, but what is the reason that you have a longer budget?
Investment on infrastructure, investment on staff, and also you have to have a long-term budget. So you take like those investments, how capital expenditure investments are done periodically in order to achieve a long-term objective.
Exactly, that is it. One thing is that, okay, if there is a major capital expenditure to happen, major expansion to happen, right? So if you have 1 year, always work with 1 year windows, what is going to happen is your major expansion that is going to happen, you will need a lot of money, and then you may have to go for IPO or debenture issue or something, right? So then you don't have enough time. So therefore the top level, high level numbers always in larger organizations especially, you need to have a longer term financial plan. That is one thing, that is one aspect. But even otherwise, there are certain industries you need to have not 1 year budget, but you need to have a longer budget. For example, business in the construction industry. Because certain years you are starting a lot of contracts, no revenue. That will be a disastrous year. But in a couple of coming years, there are a lot of projects are completing and you are going to get all the revenue in that year. So therefore, if you look at only in between intervals, you may see very highly positive period, highly negative period. But that does not give you an idea whether overall where you stand. Because in a year where you complete a lot of contracts, so you may get a lot of profit, not because that year you have done fantastically well, because that is the work that has been accumulated over a period of time. That is one. And then agriculture also can be the same thing. Because agriculture also sometimes the droughts and the seasonality that is going to happen, the cycles that you can have, and economics, some businesses are affected in the economic cycle. So then there can be particularly bad periods, and you know in advance these are going to be bad periods. And there can be particularly good years, you know in advance, take time roughly, these are going to be the good years. So because that is the nature of the business. So in that case also, you look at the negative year and thinking that everything is going to be negative and not curtailing your investment and doing all that, then you are not ready to for the next year when you have a good rainfall and good climatic condition, you may not be here to do that. So therefore it is very important, sometimes the construction related, agriculture related industries, that you have a long-term financial plan apart from that investment related scenarios. And there is another setup that you can do. Sometimes there are businesses with limited products with shorter life cycle. Okay, products with shorter life cycle. I don't know exactly, I haven't studied that, but let us say Apple, for example. Right? You have in a particular year you launch a new model. Another couple of years you may not have a major launch. Right? So the year that you launch the model, you have a huge sale. Right? Because that's the launch period. But then the next couple of years you 1 year interval, so then that can be very good years, bad years, but that will not give us a positive picture. So therefore, those organizations, this limited product, it goes through life cycles and limited life cycles.